Show episode of the day. I don't remember what number it is. That's the hardest part of this pod. But thanks for being here. This is, it's the middle of May, 2026. I'm having a great time. I feel good. I feel very excited. I'm taping. This will come out on Tuesday. Thursday, May 21st, I will be taping a little special thing at the lab at Zany's right here in Nashville, and I'm very pumped about it. It's going to be great. I got a bunch of my friends on the show, and they're all very funny, so a lot of pressure for me. Got to live up to it, but I'm excited. I've been doing comedy for 10 years. 10 years this May, and this week I've been kind of just focusing on getting it all ready, getting everything ready for the taping. So I didn't deep dive any weird topics this week, but I figure I've been deep diving comedy for 10 years, so I would just talk about that. And I love comedy, man. I really, it's a very funny job in terms of what I thought it was going to be and then what it has ended up being in my life. And it is a lot like going to prison for 10 years where I no longer could go back. I couldn't leave. If I left comedy, I've been institutionalized by comedy. I would really struggle. I don't think Jimmy John's would take me back. I worked at Jimmy John's for a while, and I think I've lost the ability to do it because it's such a specific job. It's very, man. I'm happy that I'm part of a career that is incredibly specific. It's like being like a magician or in the circus or something where you're like, listen, I know people are like, ooh, that's interesting, but anyone who's not a comic, there's just this kind of gap where it's hard to explain fully. I mean, it's even, young comics, part of what young comics need is just time to learn all of the things that don't make sense but are true about comedy. All of the things where you go, why do we do it like that? And they go, because it's too late to run this industry properly. That's why. It's a fun job it's a fun job when you're in a good place with it. It can be, being in entertainment you can end up real bitter, but it's like if you run away to join the circus and then you're like, I wish I had some stability in my life. You're like, well, you joined the circus. This is you. A lot of people will be like, comedy is not fair or it doesn't reward the best comics or whatever. And you're like, yeah, of course not. It's like the carnival. You know what I mean? It'd be like going to the state fair and being like, I don't think they're rewarding the best basketball shooters with those teddy bears. You're like, yeah, it's not. No one said it was going to be like this. It's a crazy, weird gig, but it's a very fun gig. And there are moments that are, pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff that happened to me in comedy that I'm very grateful for. So this episode, I'm just going to talk about sort of the 10 years of comedy and some of my favorite highlights and lowlights. I also got, if you hear a weird snapping sound, my chair is made of strings. It's a weird chair, and then I got a seat cushion behind me because I am getting old. I had to get a seat cushion because when you do road comedy, you drive for like 10 hours every couple of weeks. And that's the lamest. That's the lamest part of comedy is that it like tears your body up, not in like a cool, blue collar way where you're like his hands are worn like leather because of all the stuff he did. You're just like his back is curved because of all the subways he drove to. You know what I mean? It's one of the. But yeah, I'm pumped. 10 years. So. How did I get started? I started 10 years ago. I went to school at Florida State University, an elite, the Harvard of Florida. And before that, Tallahassee Community College. Shout out. When I enrolled at Tallahassee Community College, they did give me a shirt that said I made it, which was fun because they had to take me. If you graduated high school in Florida, they had to let you in to TCC. So that was a good time. And then I finished school and I was like, listen, I knew I wanted to do stand-up, and I also knew it was such a weird career that if you didn't just start, if you thought about it at all, you would just be like, no, how is this? This is insane. So I, out of nowhere, I got a call from a cousin not even my cousin's husband, who I didn't know at the time, a guy named Ian, and he said, if you want, I heard you want to do comedy. If you want, I used to live on a 16-foot sailboat, tiny little boat. He goes, I don't live there anymore, obviously, because I'm married. Tough to keep living there when you're married. But you can come live there for free. And that was, free rent was that's a prerequisite for comedy. So I said, great, I'll do that. And I literally graduated and then drove that weekend to Toronto, Canada, Mordor, as I call it. I'm just kidding. It's great. And then, I started living on a boat. I lived on a little sailboat. It's always funny. You have to explain. People go you live on a boat, like on that show, whatever that show my wife watches, Below Deck, where it's just it's just hot people being insane and then the staff being they're a little crazy. It's not like that. It was a 16-foot boat. Maybe it was bigger. I don't know. I couldn't stand up fully. That's how tall it was. And I had everything was dual purpose, right? So you had a table it was a table in the daytime, and then you took out the piece of metal that was longer and put the shorter piece in, and it became a bed at night. And then I had there was a little sleeping bunk in the back. The first night I remember, because it's in the winter, they take it out of the water. It's just sitting there. First night I go to bed. I'm in a country, it's not, going to Canada is not that different, but it was a little different. So I'm feeling a little weird, feeling a little alienated, and I go to bed and I wake up and I hit the light, and I swear to God, synchronized, hundreds of spiders were descending on their web. And I was just oh God, this is going to be, I think the first night I went and slept above deck because I was so freaked out by the spiders. And then the next day I just led a massive extermination effort. It was a lot of fun. But so I go and live on the sailboat, and then you got to figure out. I also had everything being dual purpose. I had a pee bucket, which was a bucket that you could pee in, but it also made sure that no woman wanted to meet me, which was great because it made sure I could focus on comedy. That was very useful on the boat. But it was funny too because the pee bucket, you were supposed to I don't know, you were supposed to do something with it. You were supposed to do something that wasn't dump it in the water, but it felt crazy to live on a sailboat and have a pee bucket and then be I'm going to do something other than dump this in the water. Do you know what I mean? It just it felt insane to walk around with a box of pee and take it somewhere. That seemed worse than peeing in the lake. It was better. This is the right thing to do. So I lived on the boat. I started doing open mics. I didn't know how to do comedy. I just knew. That's what's so crazy about comedy. There's no. I guess now you can just go. I guess even back then you could have done it if I'd been smarter. But you can just make your way on social media and then do all that. But I didn't know anything, and I was just I don't know how to. How do you start doing this? So I just started going to open mics. I remember the first open mic I ever did was at a place called the Ossington on Ossington Street in Toronto. And I bombed. So I had what I thought was because I was kind of cocky. I was I knew I wanted to do stand-up. And so I thought that meant anything. I was well, I've wanted to do it for a while, so I should bank that as experience. And I thought I had what I thought was a 5-minute fart story. And this happens, especially early on. You go, this is 5 minutes of gold. And then something happens where when you step on stage and you start to say it while people are looking at you, your brain goes, oh, actually, this is 14 seconds and not that funny. This is I have passed through another dimension, and in this dimension, this sucks. So I just bombed, and then I went back to the boat, and I was what have I done? And so I didn't cry. I just got something in both my eyes for a long time. No, I was pretty bummed. And then the next night I was I got to do another one. You got to get right back on the horse. And I did okay. At the time I thought I crushed. I was it's a shame that no one from the big agencies were here because I would be signed. I thought it was that, but looking back, I got some laughs. But so I did that, and then so I stayed there for six 7 months. And it was funny. It was an interesting time. So this was 2015 or 16 in Toronto. And there were a lot of comics there who I saw. I didn't meet all of them, but I saw a lot of them who have gone on to do a lot of stuff. Like Ryan Long was there. Steph Taleb was there. Robbie Hoffman was there. A bunch. I think Nick Nemiroff was there. I think I remember seeing him on a few shows. There were a bunch of people who later moved to America and are now touring headliners. But it was a great. It was just fun. It was very cool. Comedy's like this weird. It sort of delays your. You don't really have to join the adult world. You know what I mean? It's kind of like college all over again. It's like college without all the classes because you're just hanging out with a bunch of other sort of aimless people. And, you're like, I'm grinding. Comics love to say they're grinding, but you're driving to a bar and drinking and waiting for 2 hours to then do a thing for 5 minutes and then talk about it for 3 more hours. It's not really a salt mine. So I did that. I was there for 6 months. It was great. You know what? I really appreciate that I started somewhere I didn't end up because you just suck at comedy when you start. Even the people I know now who are really funny, they sucked. Everybody sucks at comedy in the beginning because it's if you don't suck at comedy, you're a sociopath. If you don't have to learn some craft and some things about how audiences react, like if you're like a socialized normal person and you go on stage, it won't go well. You have to learn this alternate way of being, this sort of, magnified way of being. So I sucked in the beginning, and then there's levels of sucking. There are people who suck where you go, you should never, you're tough to talk to in an elevator. You shouldn't try this. And then there's other guys where you're like, that went really bad, but there's little, you can see they're going to be funny. And that's a fun thing too. But 10 years is long enough that I've seen a bunch of guys who have just gone from A to B, like gone really far. And it's fun when you go, I thought that guy was going to be good. And then he ended up being great. So I'm in Toronto for 6-7 months living on this boat. It was a wild time. And then everyone basically, I started to get to know Canadian comics, and they were like, nobody lives in Canada to pursue entertainment. That was what was funny. I didn't realize, like, everyone in Toronto and Canada, which is basically like Toronto is most of Canada as far as people, they're all trying to get visas to go work in the United States if they're in entertainment, because there's, in America you can tour forever. You can do I've done comedy in 48 states, and I'm sure I have done maybe 4% of all the available clubs. Like that, it's just not there's so much stuff here in Canada. There's Toronto, Vancouver, and then the rest of the country in between. But there's like, I remember at the time there was Yuck Yucks, maybe something else. I never was doing any of that stuff, but you could just see like, oh, okay, that was there. You're sort of locked into one chain. Whereas here, there's a million of them. So everybody told me, move, basically, go back to America. That's what they said to me. They said, go back to America. So I did. I went back, and I was driving home. I was driving to Florida, and I stopped to see a buddy in Nashville, and my buddy Rico, and he fully white guy. Just we call him Rico, but his name is Robert. But I always liked that. I like that he just went, I'm taking that. That's my nickname. So I stopped here, and I must have done Bobby's Idle Hour, which was the first open mic I ever did in Nashville. And I think it went great, or I just liked the people. And so I just said, this is it. I'm going to stay here. I don't want to go back home. And then I lived in a Airbnb that you could get you could rent for like a month or something on Electric Avenue in East Nashville. And then I almost immediately got shot at. I was there like 4 or 5 months. I remember one night I was doing shows with my friend Chance Willie, one of my really great friends who I went on to live with for years. We do this show. We do an open mic, and then we're going back to my house, and we're drinking, we're whatever. It's like 2 a.m, and I swear to God, we're watching the Great British Baking Show, and it's like 2 a.m. It's not a great neighborhood, and I hear a knock on the door. And, now, I go, if someone knocks on your door at 3 a.m, you should probably shoot them. But at the time, I was like, well, I'm, the 23-year-old optimistic guy. I'm sure someone needs help or whatever. But so I went to the door and I opened it, and there was like a young guy with a gun, which was nuts. And I remember it was very funny. Not at the time. It was very funny. I just opened it. We looked at each other, and then I closed the door. I was like, no, thank you. And then there was another door. Somebody shot through that door, which was a crazy. I guess like the cops came and were not really that into it. They were like, I remember one of the cops was like, "You should get a gun." That was his advice, which was very funny. But they said it was like a gang initiation thing or something random. But it was pretty eye opening. It definitely felt like, okay, wow, I'm living in a big city, So yeah, then I started doing stand-up here, and it was so fun because I don't know, Nashville. It's a great comedy scene, especially now. We've gotten a bunch of Nate Bargatze and Theo Vaughn and Dusty Slade. And we've gotten a bunch, and Aaron Weber. We got a bunch of people who were touring nationally, and that just helps so much in a scene. And Zany's being a A-level club is those things trickle down. And they give you just like a roadmap to, I've gotten to do a lot of cool stuff in comedy, and I don't think I would have if we didn't have stuff like that here. But in the beginning, you're not doing any of that. In the beginning, you're just going to horrific open mics. And if you've never been to an open mic, it's hard to explain how bad it is. It's like, it's the first one I went to, there was a guy who, if you know anything about Nashville comedy, you'll know. But I'll leave all the names out just because it's cleaner. The first open mic I went to, the guy who hosted it was like an institution in Nashville when I first got here, and he was running the open mic, which is just anybody can go up, and he was also running for mayor of Nashville, and so he would start these open mics where he would be like, all right, guys, 4 minutes, 1 minute light. Also, we got to get high-speed fiber in town. And you would just be like, is this what open mics are? Like, he would just, the first 2 minutes of every show, there would just be, random bewildered bar patrons. And he'd be like, we got to get a rail system in Tennessee. Okay, guys, 3 minute light. And you'd be like, what? Who is this? So I remember he was here, and we had. This is when I met Dusty Slade and Aaron Weber, who were both a little ahead of me as far as they've been doing it for a while, and they both gave me, they still do. They both give me a lot of help and a lot of great advice. But I really missed the beginning, because in the beginning of comedy, everything is so unclear. You're like, so I go up at this bar that no one at the bar knows there's a show, or if they do, they're like the weirdest people on it. There are people who go to open mics all the time, and they're thank God they exist, but they're lunatics. And then you just go, how does saying weird jokes in this room like lead to a career? Because there's no talent bookers there. People think it's like, we're auditioning all the time. You are mostly doing shows into the void. Do you know what I mean? There's nobody's watching it. There's no, it's a very confusing system, because you're just doing comedy, and then you're like, how does this ever lead to like a W-2 or a 1099? How does this, you just do it, and then you meet people and you make connections. So I remember I was doing if you haven't been in an open mic, you should go, because just once. Don't go. If you go twice, something's wrong with you. But if you go once, it's so funny, because you just see, you see some of the worst comedy you've ever seen, and then you'll sometimes see good stuff, and there'll be like little moments where you're like, oh, okay, it's hot. When I first started doing comedy here, we had the East Room. We still have the East Room, but when I started, the East Room was awesome. The East Room was like a big deal, and you would go. Here's what I think was great about the East Room. It used to be show up, go up, meaning there was 25 spots. Whoever got there first, that was the order. right? So if the show was at 8 and you got there at 5, you were going to go up first. So for like years, me and my 2 roommates who were comics, we would get there at like 5:30, and you would just hang out in this alley with all the other comics, and then you would talk and roast each other, and it was a fun hang. But it also was a great self-selecting system of like, if you didn't want to do comedy, if you weren't like really committed to it, you weren't going to get there 3 hours early. So it sort of picked people who made comedy a priority, which was great because then the show was better. There is a connection in my experience between do you care and are you any good? Because a lot of people just do comedy because I don't know why. A lot of people do it and you're like, man, this is making your life worse, and you're not getting any benefits out of it. But so a lot of people just show up, and back then it was you really would get ready. It was every Tuesday you'd get ready for it, and you'd be like, I want to do well at the East Room. And if you did well, it felt great, and if you did bad, it felt terrible. And I saw some very funny bombs when I was at the East Room. I remember one time, this is my favorite. I saw a guy bombing so hard that on stage he said to the audience, he just went, "Help me!" And the whole it was all silent except for like 15 comics who were laughing so hard in the back. I've seen some great, horrific bombs. That's a fun thing. When you do comedy long enough, you get like, you bomb yourself, so you get a little desensitized to it, and you start to, you can find the humor in it. And there are some very funny bombs. The funniest bomb I ever saw, I did a show in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was a bringer show. Meaning if you brought people, they would put you up. And this guy went up, clearly had never done comedy, but when he goes up, like a big, like, woo, like he had a lot of people there. He goes up, he's, I don't know, 4 seconds in, and the mic comes unplugged. And you can see he does not know what to do. And there's people being like, you got this. People yelling, encouraging, and this guy is melting down. You can see he's starting to sweat. He just starts talking. We're like, people are screaming, we can't hear you. And I swear to God, this guy, he didn't get off stage the way he came. He just walked off the front of the stage. He walked off the front of the stage into the audience of people he had brought, and then he just left the room, and I assume moved. I assume that guy just never... He just walked off the front of the stage. He was like, well, I gave it my best. I mean, he was maybe up there for 45, 50 seconds, and the mic went out 10 seconds in. It was a great... I drove the whole... That's the other crazy thing, too, about comedy. I drove 6 hours to Charlotte, and then, you're not making any money, so you can't get a hotel. I drove right back that night. I just remember driving back being like, I'm glad I'm not that guy. You know what I mean? That was a tough... that was a tough one to watch. And then I did the open mics. You meet a lot of people. I did my first road gig. I did my first road gig in... like real road gig, meaning that I got a hotel. That was such a big deal to me. I think I called my dad to be like, I got a hotel. And it was in Jackson, Tennessee, which I've lived in 10 years. I've lived in Nashville for 10 years now. Can happily report Jackson, Tennessee, terrible town. Every time I drive through it, something goes wrong. There's a traffic jam, and it's always like a mayonnaise truck has fallen over, or, a deer has called a school board meeting. It's always the craziest reason you've ever heard. And they go, yeah, it's going to add 3 hours to your trip. And you're like, you're just heading west in Tennessee, driving through Memphis. There was like a year where Memphis was like, we forgot to check our bridge. It was just, the bridge was out. And they were like, yeah, sorry, it snuck up on us. And you're like, what is wrong with, driving west out of Tennessee is a disaster. It's Jackson and Memphis are the two where you're like, you're killing me. You got to get it together. But I remember I did my first gig, and it was with Hannah Hogan, which was now Hannah Slay, Dusty's wife. She was a comic at the time, and she booked me to do the gig. So I drive to Jackson. She was already out there with another comedian who's a Nashville comic, and we're doing the gig. We're doing 2 shows one night, and then you're going to get a hotel and drive back the next day. I thought this was the big time. So I was very pumped. We go to the show. It was at this place that oh man, what was it called? State Street Comedy Club, and it was terrible. It was that place is closed, and it makes sense. It was I had a lot of fun there. One of the trashiest, just a mess. It was kind of, I will say, I liked getting to do comedy like that because you kind of feel comedy feels like this thing where the road and like the stuff you hear about, it's all disappearing, right? There you hear about these gigs in the 80s or 90s where they would do, 6 shows and 6 nights, and after the gig you couldn't sleep, you had to leave right then or you wouldn't make the next gig, stuff like that. All these sort of romantic, and you're traveling with a map. I used to open for Rodney Carrington. He would always tell me about doing these gigs where he'd pull off and sleep in his truck at a road stop and then make it to the next gig, and no phones, and it was just a different world, and I felt like I missed out on that. So whenever you got to do a gig, because there are comedy clubs that feel like they're stuck back in time, and it was fun to do those. It was fun to see those gigs and be like, what is going on? I remember State Street, they had a bartender, and he was this sassy gay guy, and he whenever you asked for a beer, usually, that's another way you can tell if it's a good club or a bad club, is they charge you or don't charge you for drinks. And I remember being like, hey man, can I get a beer? And he was like, I don't know, can you? And I was like, what? Like that, I was like, all right, whatever. And then I got off stage after I did my set, and he was like, I was, looking for some sort of validation. And I go over there and I was like, hey man, can I get another beer? And he goes, Eugene's real tight up there. And I was like, well, all right, man, you know what? I'll skip the drink. I'm good. But it was like, I remember I went there a few more times, and every time you went, he was like heckling you almost. Not when you were on stage, but when you tried to get a beer, he would always have like a sassy riddle. And you'd be like, just give me the beer. I can't imagine why you're doing this. This is the craziest, this is the worst thing for business I can imagine. But that you would run into these clubs where you would just be like, how is this place still open? Like, I remember at State Street, they would always have the marquee, it's just off the highway in like a shopping mall. And the marquee said, it was like the name of the headliner. And then right under it, it said dishwasher wanted. And you're like, listen, either don't try to make this look like a marquee. Either this is a marquee or this is a now hiring sign. Don't do both because it just looks crazy. But I remember doing a show there. I remember the comic before me bombed so hard that they switched our time. So that I showed up and they said, you're doing 10, you're doing 20, and Hannah will do 50. After the first show, the club, not the headliner. The headliner maybe can do that. That's kind of normal. The club came and said, you guys switch. And I was like, okay, all right. This is a results business. So I did that gig. That was a horrific, I was very grateful at the time, and it was fun, but looking back, you're just like, man, it was, I remember there was a guy, I did a show there, and there was a guy, and he had fallen asleep, like with his head on the table. And I was like, is he okay? And this guy next to him goes, he's on drugs. But he said it like, yeah, he's fine. He's on drugs. Like, he goes, don't worry about it. He's on drugs. And I was like, oh, okay. I thought maybe that was a problem. Yeah, so that was a great gig. Then I started doing, what else did I do? I did some gigs with Dusty. That was a big break. Dusty was the first guy to ever take me on the road, like in a real way. Because, to me, in a real way, what I mean is that gig in Jackson, you spend the night in the hotel, you drive right home. You're home the next morning at, noon or whatever. Dusty took me in 2017, maybe 18, to do Springfield, Missouri, and where was the other place? Somewhere in Kansas. We did a basement auditorium in Kansas, and I remember getting out there, and I probably was, again, comedy, you have to think you're better than you are at all times. You have to be like, I'm good, and then a year later be like, what was I doing? That's like you have to have that healthy balance of like delusion and realistic assessment. So we drove out there 10 hours in the car. That was like Dusty had this Volvo that I think had 300,000 miles on it. And, so you're just 24, 25 this guy goes, "Hey, you want to come do these gigs?" And I went, and we go, drive 10 hours out there. So you spend 10 hours with a guy you don't know in a car ride. Luckily, that's how you become friends quickly. But that's one of the weirder parts of comedy. Is you just take these long road trips with strangers sometimes. We drive 10 hours out there. We do the Kansas gig. I'm terrible, but it's going okay. And then Springfield, Missouri. Then the next gig I do with Dusty, we did, I remember this, we did a gig in Peoria, Illinois in the winter. And it was, this was my first bleak, because that's what's funny too. People think comedy is just all this stuff. By the time you're seeing it as just a regular person, that's not what most of comedy is. If you're seeing a Netflix or a sold out club, or you're seeing a taping, that's like comedy at its best. A lot of what comedy is you show up in a crazy town that you've never been to before. The weather's horrible, and then you go to a weird hotel. Then you go to the gig. You haven't talked to anybody all day, and then you meet a local psycho who's hosting for you, and it has its own charm, but it's very funny. So we go to this gig in Peoria, and the guy's we walk in, he's like, "We have not sold a lot of tickets," which you never want to. If they tell you that the day of the show, you go, "Listen, I know. The reason you're paying me what you're paying me is I don't think you thought you were going to sell a lot of tickets. So don't act like." But they love to be like, "That's on, I thought you were going to sell this place out. That's why I offered you $200." So we get there. It's it's bleak. This is back when Dusty was Dusty. Now sells out theaters, big draw. But this was earlier, and he sold tickets. But we would do some markets where it would just be. Dusty would work hard. He would go do any show anywhere. So we did Peoria in a snowstorm, and there was, 7 people there in a 100-seat room, and I'm just bombing. And this podcast sounds like I only bombed. I did well relatively, but when you look back after 10 years, if you don't think every show you did in the first 2 or 3 was a bomb, something's wrong. So I'm doing the show. I'm probably struggling because there's 7 people, and I remember this guy. The speakers in the club or at the theater that talk the PA or whatever. We call it the voice of God. So the voice of God, the guy comes on in the middle of my set. I'm in the middle of a joke, and he goes, "Just so everyone knows, there's a fire next door. It's not a problem, but I thought you guys might want to see it." And I swear to God, people get up to go see the fire because there was a strip club next door, and that's the type of place this was. There's a strip club next door, and the guy, people just got up to go see the fire. If I wasn't already doing badly on this show, now people are getting up just to go see a fire, and then so we do Peoria, and then the next day, so Hannah, Dusty's wife, was also a comedian at the time, so she is doing a gig somewhere else. I guess it's on the way. So the next morning, Hannah and Dusty are together, and so Dusty and I are going to leave, and I think Hannah's going to keep sleeping at the hotel because she got in later. Something. We're leaving separately, but we're all headed back to Nashville. So Dusty and I leave when we get maybe 2 or 3 hours down the road, and then he gets a call, and I hear him go, "I don't know," and then I hear him go, "Oh no!" He checks his pocket. He had taken Hannah's car keys, so we are now 2 or 3 hours down the road, and we got to go back 3 hours. So we go back and give Hannah her keys. We have lunch there. So now it's 1 p.m. We've driven for 6 hours. We've made no progress. So then we leave again, and we're down the road maybe 5 or 6 hours, and Hannah left a little after us, 30 or 40 minutes after us. And so we're an hour away from home. We make the whole drive, and he gets another call. And I just hear him go, "Really?" or something. And then he goes, "Hannah's car hit a deer." So we got to go back another hour, get Hannah. The car had to get towed, I think, the next day and drive home. So I think it was like a 13-hour or 14-hour round trip day, which was, again, that's just one of those things in comedy where you're like, man, what happened? God, that was a feels like a different lifetime. I did those gigs for a while, and a lot of them were very fun. That's the other cool thing too. You get, when you're doing comedy, you get to hang out with your friends, which is, I feel like as an adult, you don't really get to hang out with your friends at work. You can't do that. But at comedy, they used to have comedy condos too, where everyone would stay under the same roof, and that was kind of like a big hang. Those have died out. I think mostly because it's like everything in comedy, where these clubs used to own comedy condos, and that's where every week the whole show would stay there. The host, feature, and headliner, or opener, middle, and headliner, and so they would all stay there, and it would be, you'd hear these crazy stories of partying and all this stuff. By the time I was doing it, that was kind of gone. There were a few comedy condos left, and some of them were nice, but I think most of the hotels were like, well, we'll just take the hotel points. We don't need to do this. We don't need to own property to pay these people, not that much. So yeah, I remember there were the ones that the Looney Bins still had comedy condos. There's still a few Looney Bins left. There's a good Looney Bin in Tulsa. The Tulsa and Looney Bin is actually a good club, and it's got new ownership, and it's great. But the old Looney Bins were wild. They were what I'm talking about, where I'm like glimpses of old comedy. And I remember staying at the comedy condo in Little Rock, Arkansas, Little Rock is some of the worst times in my life I've spent in Little Rock. Sorry if you're from Little Rock. I would love to have a great time out there. It just hasn't happened. And they had a comedy condo, and man, I remember it was just there were all these like road stories, like don't use any of the condiments in the fridge because the people before you probably put something in it. Or there would be like fun stuff, like they would be like check the roof tiles, like if they had the little stuff you can press up and see if there's, if they move. Sometimes people would like leave you weed at a condo. I remember I did a show with a guy once, and he was like, my friend was here last week, and he left me all his weed because he couldn't fly with it. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. But yeah, you would just stay in these weird, communal homes for 4 days. And I remember one time at Little Rock, they gave us rules. They were like, no partying and no hooking up. And you were like, I mean, first of all, I don't foresee that in my future. I don't know that a lot of girls are coming back to this weird house. And second, I'm making like $30 a show. I'm already down on this gig because of gas money. It's not really. You're not holding my life in my hands. I feel like I might be willing to do what I want if that opportunity comes up. You know what I mean? These clubs will talk to you and they'll be like, you got to, and you're like, listen, I'm not even an employee. I'm here for the night. You know what I mean? It's, try to be, I like being, I always get along at the clubs, and I think I'm low maintenance and all that. But it was always funny when a club would be like, you got to listen up, and you'd be like, don't, just get out of here. I'm not listening to this. What else happened? We did, yeah, the guy walking off the front of the stage. That was probably my favorite. That was probably my favorite story in the beginning of comedy. Oh, I did a show in Jacksonville once on my 25th birthday, and they gave me the honeymoon suite at a Holiday Inn. I'm totally by myself, and they put me in this room with a heart-shaped bathtub, and I remember just being like roses, and I was like, this is so sad. I'm by myself on my birthday in the bath, just like, happy birthday to me. I go do this gig. It's a horrible gig. It's a bar gig, where I'm just in some bar, and there was just, I remember I got on stage and there was a loose pit bull in the front row was like a pit bull, no leash, just like looking at me like, go do your set. And so I'm bombing, and everybody bombed on the show except one guy, a blind guy, a real blind guy, walked through the room like with his cane up. And I remember the headliner was like, oh man, look, it's Gandalf the Grey, because he was this big old guy with a big beard. He called him Gandalf the Grey, and he said his blind guy stick was a staff, and it crushed. I mean, the audience could not have been laughing harder at this blind guy. So we did the gig. It was at a biker bar, and I remember I'm outside after the show. I just want to leave, but you kind of got to hang. If you leave right after, it kind of looks like you bombed. And so I'm sitting there. It's my birthday. I'm in the honeymoon suite at this Holiday Inn. I'm on the porch of the bar after the show, and there's a sign that says, because it's a biker bar, it says no weapons, no drugs, no colors, like gang colors. But this drunk guy walks up to me, and he points at the sign, and he goes, no colors in 2018. Do you believe that? He completely he thought it was like a integration sign. He was like, no, can you believe that? No colors in this place. I go, no, you can. I think it's gang colors, but I didn't argue with him. I just go, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I did that gig. That was a fun gig. Man, I didn't expect. I thought this episode was going to cover more stuff, but I'm realizing it would be a lot of episodes if I tried to like get you up to now. So I guess this episode will just be early horrible road gigs. But man, there were so many funny. That's what I love about comedy. There were so many funny moments. I remember one gig that I did. This was early in Toronto. There was a show, and on Wednesdays in this bar upstairs, you'd go upstairs, and it was like an event space, and they would just do different weird stuff. So Wednesdays was comedy night, and then Thursdays was like I don't know. It was like a fetish sex club place. I don't know how else to describe this. And so people would wear like leather and like, you ever see Pulp Fiction with the gimp suit? There was a guy doing that. That was on the poster. So we're in there. There's like 10 people it's a horrible show. We're all just bombing for each other. And this guy comes in, and he is wearing a full-on leather suit. He is dressed. He is clearly here for the next night's event. Like the swingers club, whatever weird thing he's there for. But he comes in, and he sits down, and I think it takes him a while to clock that he has not come to the right show. So he's sitting there, and he watches one guy, and then he watches another guy, 8 minutes go by. And then he stands up. I don't think he had any idea what an open mic was. He stands up and he goes, all right, guys, great stuff. That was good. Okay, thank you for the show. And then he like claps. Everyone's looking at him like, what are you doing? And then he just left the building. But I love that he tried to play it off. I love that he was like, yeah, I can pull this off. They're not gonna be able to tell I came to the wrong event. There's no way they'll know. Yeah. Oh, that was a fun one. What were the other fun ones? I did a gig in a casino in Oklahoma. This is when I started opening for Rodney Carrington, and I would do these gigs, and they'd be big gigs. Like I think one show was 5,000 people, which in the first time you do a theater gig is kind of crazy, and then the first time you do a gig that's like a big theater, that's a wild feeling. So I remember I'm doing this gig, and I go to the green room. There's some casino in Oklahoma, and Toby Keith is sitting there, which is not normal. And I'm talking, and I'm kind of, but I don't know it's Toby Keith. I just know that it's a guy dressed like the craziest I've ever seen. You know what I mean? He's got like a giant cowboy hat, and these crazy glasses, and all this stuff. And so I'm talking to him, and I'm trying to be like, who is this guy? But I don't want to just be like, who are you, to some guy in the, it's not my green room, it's the headliner. So whatever, I go do the show, and I walk out. It's 5,000 people. It's rowdy. It is a rowdy. Rodney's audience was great, but they were rowdy, and they're all screaming. And I start doing my act, and then that's the other thing too. When you're the first guy on a show, you're kind of just there. You're like just there to take the hit. You're there. You're the first, those war movies where they open the boat and the first guy gets shot. That's what you're doing. You're there so that the crowd can settle in and get ready for the show. They call it the bullet spot because you're taking the bullet. That first spot on the show, never the right spot. Or never the good spot. So you go, I'm doing my act, and then I swear to God, I start seeing a guy. There's like a lot of commotion, and I'm looking, and there's a guy getting arrested, but he's not getting handcuffed. He's getting picked up each limb by a different cop. He has 4 cops carrying him out. And, the whole audience is just looking at him. There's 5,000 people ignoring me, and he's screaming and all this stuff. And I just remember being like, they were all looking at something that happens, and I keep talking, and then he screams something, and I go, give it up for my dad. And they all laughed and it put the show back on the rails, that's one of those, just survival comedy things you learn where you're like, just roll with it and make it as long as you don't seem flustered, they assume you handle it, and the show went on. But yeah, man, it was oh yeah. So then I go backstage and Toby Keith is like, good set, which was a fun moment. And to this day, I regret not saying, I should have been a cowboy. I wish that was my dream. I wish I had said that to him. But I didn't. I just said thanks. And then I went back to my sad casino hotel room and counted my buffet vouchers. That's what I did. I had a good time though. But yeah, I thought I would get through a lot more ground, but there's so many comedy stories. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This week I'm really trying to focus on the taping and all that, so I didn't want to deep dive a new topic. I got some great ones coming up. I've been researching future episodes, and I have some stuff I'm really excited about. So I really appreciate you guys all listening. A lot of people have sent me nice stuff and some interesting stuff, and it's very fun doing this. So I hope you like this one. If you do like the comedy stuff, let me know, and I'll do more of these episodes, because I didn't get through that much because I guess I have more stories than I thought about comedy. But yeah, I'm very excited to tape this thing on Thursday, and then it will come out on YouTube whenever it's ready, and I hope people like it. But yeah, I'm having a great time. I hope you guys like this episode, and yeah, thank you for listening. See you guys next week.